a hired professional manager, you could fire him and say, you screwed up, you're fired. You can't fire your family particularly, but you can discuss it with your family. And in Luigi's case, he had other qualities. But the fact is that people use blame in a family business context. And under the rules of psychology, you can't do that. Because if you're sitting at the table and you agree that a family member should go and do something and it goes wrong, it's not just him who's responsible, you've got exactly the same responsibility. So when something goes wrong in your family business, don't immediately blame somebody, blame yourself first, because that's where the blame starts. And that's why, in psychological terms, a family business is a complex system where that dynamic exists, and it's the only form of enterprise that can possibly have that psychological effect. Okay? Now, there are some conflicts and there are some conflicts, and people do very extreme things in conflictual situations. This is the story of a young woman called Sheetal Mifalao, an Indian lady who was the daughter of a very successful businessman. And she ended up running a very large Indian business called Mafalao. And what happened to her was she was suffering very badly because the rules of the family were that the women were not allowed to inherit shares. They didn't have Sharia in that community, but they have other, in the Sindhi community, for example, they have rules that the women get married and go off with their husbands and they will never have shares in the company. And this particular family had an absolute prohibition on her becoming a shareholder. But she was brilliant. She did huge amounts of good, and the shares were very valuable. So in order for her to get shares, she did a gender reassignment. You've heard me, sex change. So there are some solutions to certain conflicts or issues. Well, I can't comment, but all I can tell you is it was a pretty extreme way of solving a problem. But it's true, and that's why I said truth is stranger than fiction. So if you really believe something, you know there are no limits in family businesses. Okay, so managing conflict and difficulties in a family business is often about the separation of ownership and management. You know, yes, Dad, I'll take an interest in the company. How does 50% sound? And you end up with I end up with two circles, because I think it's easy to understand that if you don't manage and look to see how you can avoid getting into the middle, you have a problem, because the friction and conflict are inevitable. How you do it, you separate things. You have shareholders to do shareholder things, you have business people to do business things. And the simplest form of structure is where you have a group board. You might have a family council, which is those people who are better able to deal with it, and you might have a family assembly consisting of the whole family. But what the family has to do is the family has to decide what role they want. And when you think about a family, you think about people who start the business and the people who add the value creators, the entrepreneurs. They are the owner-managers. The next generation are owner-managers. They want to be owner-managers. Some of them succeed and some of them don't. In the third generation, they might become owner-strategists because they don't want to get their hands dirty. They want to direct traffic. And in the fourth and fifth and sixth generation, they can become owner-investors. And if you decide that you want to be an owner-manager and you're not up to the job, you'll have a problem. If you decide you want to be an owner-strategist and you're not up to the job, you'll have a problem. But people have to decide where they want to sit at the table in a family business. And very often, you can have different people sitting in different places in order to make sure that you don't have conflict. This is an Indian company where they have a very strong structure, and they have a spiritual guru, a spiritual priest who helps the family with their discussions. And if you look at the top left-hand side, it says Family Non-Business Forum. This is for the daughters-in-law to have a facilitated session with the mother-in-law, because the mother-in-law is so difficult, or perceived to be so difficult. But with the spiritual guru, spiritual priest, And these regular 2-weekly meetings, she's become a lot less difficult, surprise, surprise, because people are talking to her and giving her respect. So she was perceived as difficult, and it was difficult for them to work with her, but no more because a structure was put in place to deal with it. And I think it's really important to understand that that's the issue. In this particular family, they had a case where it was father, son, 2 sons, and a son-in-law. And the father said, how can I choose between my 2 sons and my son-in-law? I'm going to have a problem. What do I do? I said to him, well, it's it shouldn't be your decision. So he looked at me and says, what do you mean? I own the whole business. It has to be my decision. So I said, no, you missed the point. Whoever you choose out of those 3 men, you're going to fall out to 2. Is that what you want to do? And he said, no, I don't want to fall out with anybody. So I said, well, surely what you should do is tell them that because they're going to have to live the rest of their lives working together in some form or other, you should tell them to go and find their solution themselves. And when they found their solution, you should bless it, because that's your job as father. And he looked at me and he was absolutely horrified. That's exactly what he ended up doing. And there was no difference of opinion or conflict at all. But if he had made the decision, there would have been. Okay, so what I want to do is just move forward. This is somebody that you might find in a family business. The caption reads, of course I could always stay on in a purely advisory capacity. I don't know if anyone's ever seen anybody like that in a family business. What I'd like to do is I'd like to share a little model that John Ward put together. And this is a really important one to understand the nature of the differences that exist. In this model, you have 3 types of family enterprise. You have owner-managed, sibling partnership, and cousin syndicate. And when those businesses end up in transition between one generation and the next, you end up in a sensitive situation. And what actually happens is the person who is the owner-manager, that person had a hard life building the business and only knows the planet owner-manager. Likewise, the sibling partners, the brothers and the sisters, only know what goes on the planet sibling partnership. They've never been to the planet owner-manager. And likewise, the cousin syndicate don't know what they do on the planet sibling partnership. And it's as if somebody has been playing golf all their life, and they say to their next generation, look, we'd like you to take over, take the clubs and the balls, and you play, and they're tennis players. So you have to appreciate that you will have differences of opinion because you don't know the rules of the game. And one has to understand that the rules of the game for the different people in different generations are going to be different. And if you understand that, you will have a lot less conflictual and differences of opinion. My son is joining the company. Please design a job that sounds important with no duties that could interfere with operations. That's not fair, but it happens a lot. And it's very destructive to everybody. I was talking about voting, with hands. All righty then, 51-49, I win again. You don't want ever to be in that situation because that's always a disaster. So one of the things that Harley was talking about was a constitution. And all a constitution is, it encapsulates the family's law. And you could spell it L-A-W, or you could spell it L-O-R-E, because it becomes folklore after a while. And it provides a code of conduct and a way of behaving so people know where they stand. Because again, you're solving tomorrow's predictable problems today. And you're setting expectations for people at the right level, and people then know where they stand. And this is not the way to do a family constitution, which is the way a lot of people do it. They just sweep it under the carpet. So you have to agree how to agree. This is another mean cartoon. As far as we can tell, the only thing keeping you alive is the realization that your son will inherit the business. Okay, I've got a couple of other things to say. I'm going to skip through family constitution. You'll get a copy of the slides. I just want to mention some personal issues about personal differences of opinion and conflicts that happen. These are the sorts of things that you get. How do you love all children equally, but each child is not equally talented? How do you deal with people who work harder with people who want time not to do other things. How do you have a situation where some work from the bottom up and some get attracted up the ladder? Parents live longer, smarter and healthier, and kids then are better prepared to take over earlier. So you've got constant dilemmas. And one of the ways you have to deal with that dilemma is communication. You have to be able to communicate honestly and openly with the family members around the table, because if you can't do that, it doesn't work. And so what happens is that you get different family groups arising. And this is some research done by London Business School, which shows the characteristics of families that have a very, very poor cultural weakness in their makeup. I'm not going to go through the detail of it, but you can see from a glance that there are different sorts of bad characteristics that you want to avoid. And how you deal with it is by not using I statements. And this is the last thing I want to share with you. I statements, it's where you tell people how you feel in relation to the issue, not accusing them of doing something. So an I statement starts with an I and ends up with a feeling. I feel anxious and a little scared about what will happen when we move forward, something like that, rather than, if you move forward, I don't like it. So let's take a quick scenario. You're working for your father and he dismisses an idea that you've had and tells your employee to do something in a different way. One possible path is a you statement. Dad, you make me so mad when you override my decisions. Very easy to do that. But if you look at the next alternative, another possible path is the I statement. Dad, I really felt undervalued and sabotaged when you told my employee to do things your way. I need my employees to respect me. Switching it from you to I removes the conflictual piece. And as a lesson in terms of communication, there are lots of these sorts of things that you can do in order not to have conflicts with members of your family. Too many times people use the you word. So the first statement has got blame attached to it, and we've already established that you can't blame anybody in the family business, so there's no point in using that language. And all I statements follow that sort of format. And I think that's a useful tip. Okay. So I'm just going to leave you with one little example of the Cargill family, who are one of the largest businesses in the world. And they're a family business, and they have got this stuff right. And you can just look at them to see how they do it. They've got sales of 70 billion, so they're not exactly a small family business. But they're owned by 100 family members, and basically they have a complete set of protocols, and they care for their employees, they care for their family, they have open communication, and they do everything that's on that list. And there are some really strong lessons on that list as to how you avoid having differences of opinion and conflicts. And all you have to do is look at any of the large, successful, multi-generational family businesses to see that, what lessons you can learn from those things. And that's just, those are the reasons why they don't have a problem. They use values. And sometimes, if you have a company and a family that have a set of values, as the gentleman we were talking before about your company, values is the key thing that enables the family businesses to hold together. And that's an example of a very large business where the values of the family and the values of the business are closely aligned together. And so my last comment is that when you see differences in a family business, you see people pointing fingers. And my thesis is that the journey from that to that is very, very short. You just have to know which buttons to press. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. I'm sure that,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. No answers, Khalid.
no,
No answers, definitely.
I'll stop. I'm saying is that usually in conflicts there is usually there are two people or group of people that want the same thing. They are after the same resource. For example, Jawad Habib, instead of he maybe is looking, he should do something terrible.
It's okay, it's only reading yourself.
I can say it in that case. Okay, he'll get me afterward. We'll talk about succession, for example. There's a lot of members of the family who wants to become the boss. So who's going to succeed the old man? Who's going, if it's two countries competing for a territory, and so there's a conflict there. Khalid Zayani maybe is looking after that woman, and she's a pretty woman, and everybody wants that. So here's the complex. There's conflict. There's a lot of people wanting the same thing, wanting the same resource. So how can you do it without creating too much problem? Okay, you showed us how it is to be done, but I still feel that there must be an easier way of resolving conflicts instead of the way that we do it. Like I have a problem with my father, I have my problem with my sister, I have a problem with my cousin. How do you handle that?
Well, whatever the area of conflict, the easiest way to do it is to have a process that deals with it in a neutral way. So let me give you an example. That Irish family company, they had a rule that said that there would only be one family director from each branch. One branch had a lot of people, and there were two people who wanted to be on the board. Is that the sort of example? So what they did is they appointed an appointments committee consisting of the professionals in the company with only one family member on the assessment committee. And they made the two people present themselves as if they were going to a job in a normal company. And one of them won and one of them lost. And they accepted the process. And the message there is that if you set up a fair process to deal with whatever it is, you don't have a fight. Because if the process is agreed at the beginning, people normally accept the outcome.
The Palestinians and Israelis, they've been conflicting for 5 years, 50 years, 60 years.
I think we're off the subject, Mr. Chairman.
In that case, who has what have a question? I think, please, stop.
Thank you very much, Peter. I enjoyed that presentation. Given the current downturn, have you seen conflicts increase, specifically relating to what's happening in the market in the last sort of 6 months, 9 months, or do you expect to see things, number of conflicts to increase in family businesses?
I would say the opposite. I think in hard times, one of the things that a family does is it realizes that it's got an innate strength of being unified. And in times of difficulty, families tend to focus on what they have in common, not what divides them. And therefore, actually, the family businesses around the world are spending time now making sure that their processes and systems and understanding is such that they don't have conflict. So I'm seeing an opposite effect.
Thank you much, Peter. You've said a lot of examples on companies from most of European countries and in the US. And a lot of the speeches that I've been hearing on family business all around always talk about families within the European and the American system. Within the Arabic system that we have, I see it a bit more different, where, number one, what do you think the best legal structure for a family business should be? Should a family business transform into a public company, or should they stay within the family? And the second, which is really I find very, very important, and I still did not find a solution for it. Within the Arab Islamic laws, how can we treat, or how can we find solutions to the Islamic Sharia inheritance that affects the family business?
Okay, well, the first question about what's the best structure, the answer is it depends. If you want to have a public company, it means that the family wants some liquidity. And once the family is a public company, shares can get sold. If the family mission is for a custodian model for the longer term, normally a trust structure is good, because it means that people don't have a share certificate that they can go and take to a bank or to a third party. So I tend to find in this part of the world and in Asia, trusts are becoming very important. Some countries like Iran don't recognize trusts, and nor does Iraq, but you can have a trust in Jordan, for example. And I think that over time, some countries' legal systems will be improved so that you can have the sort of governance that will promote the longevity of a family business. In relation to working in an Islamic context, one of the best examples I can give you, and I'm allowed to talk about, is the Habib family of Pakistan, who were originally Indians, and in 1947, on partition, they left India to go to Pakistan, and by 1970, they were the largest employer in Pakistan. They had the biggest bank, and they employed many tens of thousands of people. And the government nationalized it and took it from them with no consideration, and so they were completely wiped out. They then started again in 1980, 10 years later, and they now have a bank called Habib Bank AG in Zurich, and the balance sheet is around $9 billion, and they have 19 public companies around the world. They have a family council, they have a shareholders agreement. In fact, in London, last year in Dubai, I delivered the case study with Mr. Rafiq Habib, explaining their family structures and how they got round, how they deal with the Sharia, and how the shareholders agreement works, and how the council works. And they have a completely organized system that handles it. So it can be done. In fact, we're doing the case study again at a seminar in London in June. And Mr. Habib goes around the world now talking to large families about how to do this stuff, because he's been there, he's done it, he's got the t-shirt. And they have about 67 members of their family when they get together, and everybody knows where they stand, everybody knows what they get, everybody knows what they can do. And the Sharia is clearly there, but you can contract out of it if you want to while you're alive. So if you want to give assets to your daughters while you're alive, you can do that, as I understand it, and that's what people do.
Thank you very much. Can you just summarize in brief the challenges facing family businesses in the Gulf?
In the Gulf, I think it's to do with the fact that I've experienced something that I was introduced to some years ago. It's called Arab democracy. And the idea that was explained to me by a particular gentleman who I will not name, but he sat me down and he explained that this particular company had 5 shareholders, and the 5 shareholders were very happy. He was very happy for the 5 shareholders to make whatever decisions they like, but Arab democracy means that he decides. And so the challenge in the Gulf, as I see it, is the fact that the elder generation, because they have so much power, because they're so respected, it means that nobody communicates with them honestly. And because they respect them so much, the respect actually gets in the way of honest and open communication. Now, I have a slightly different view because I'm a Westerner, but I learned something from a businessman who explained to me once, who was a very blunt talker. And he said, if you talk to somebody and you don't tell them the truth, it's not respecting them. Telling somebody the truth as you see it is actually showing them respect. They might not like what you say, But if you tell them the truth, that is more respectful than telling them a lie. And I think the challenge in the Gulf is that the heritage that you have about the respect for elders, the way in which you define what that means, is philosophically difficult because it stops people telling the truth as they see it. So therefore, the communication that takes place within the family is not completely honest. And I've seen that because I've been a fly on the wall. I've been in the helicopter, and I know what people think in different circumstances, and I know they're not talking. But not talking and not telling the truth to each other is actually the problem. That's the biggest challenge, because if you can't have honest conversation that you don't get shot for, you don't get penalized for, then how are you going to legitimize the whole enterprise? And I think it's a very difficult, I think it's a really, really, really difficult problem. Succession is the same problem anywhere in the world. That's not specifically to the Gulf. Succession is always a problem. In the Gulf, it may be more of a problem because socially, people want to be connected with their business. They want a business card that says that they're the chairman, and if they're not the chairman, it means there's something wrong. I understand all of that, but that's the same in India, that's the same in China, that's the same in some European countries. So I don't see that that's special to the Gulf. It may be a little bit, but this point about ability to tell the truth as you see it, out of respect, and what happens is it's a sort of dilemma because you can't, because to do so would be disrespectful.
Why is it that you think it is going to be disrespectful? There are some taboos in the family that you are not allowed to talk about because it is, there may be, that is correct, taboos. But to not, it depends on how you present it to the elders. The elders, usually the elders, therefore you have the respect. But in my company, for example, or my family, yes, we are respectful, but we argue. I mean, I know Khalid Zayani will argue, but he has great respect for his father. But he tells them as it is, and I'm sure everybody is the same. Muhammad here, Zaman, also the same thing. But I don't think that if they are not being honest, then something is wrong. Then you are right, if they are. But there are those that say what they think it is. If the elders don't agree, like my uncle might not, but that doesn't mean that it's what we call there's an honest disagreement. I might say something, and then my uncle say, no, I don't agree. But we may argue.
Yeah, that arguing is good. Arguing is good, it's healthy. Because if you're arguing, you have a position, and you might not agree. But I'm talking about the cases where you can't say what you want to say out of respect. And when you find that you can't say what you want to say out of respect, you have to look at what it is, what's really going on there. That's my point. Arguing is good.
None of the family members are CEOs.
Are CEOs?
None.
Okay, so they're owner strategists, not owner managers.
Well, they work. They have to be first well educated, working experience outside the country.
Right.
Then they come in, and there are milestones of achievements within the group till they reach the level of a CEO. And once they reach that standard, that level, then they shift into the ownership group. In the ownership group, their role is to act like guardians to companies.
Which is great.
Not CEOs. Each company is run by a CEO who is the most professional we can find. And the CEO presents to the board of his company his business plan, his budgets, his targets, and he runs the business as if it is his own. Once he achieves his results, they start earning bonuses. So they are also self-motivated. The Zayani member who is looking after that company, the guardian, his job is to open doors for that CEO.
Ambassadorial.
Yes, of course they can't do everything as a CEO. And help him in the growth of the company. So the company expands with the support of its board and the assigned Zayani member.
Brilliant.
Now, each company does not pay all profits to the mother company. What they do is retain 50% of their profit in each company. And this remains for them to operate and expand in their own way. So every company has its own culture, its own character, and they often compete with each other in the marketplace. But we have looked at the conflict within family by separating ownership from management.
Exactly.
The other role for ownership is to create new business. They are experienced and they have working experience before, and they have the ability and freedom, and they are expected to produce new business.
Well, it sounds like a very, very good model. I couldn't fault any of what you said because it clearly works, but it sounds like you've done a lot of thinking and you had a lot of cooperation to do that. Sounds like a very good model.
I would like...
Before I have a question, but before I ask the question, I would like to state that in Bahrain, in the Arab world, women are the people who are losing out. Many family businesses in Bahrain and in the Gulf, the father, the first generation, the father who make the family business, he does not bring his daughters in the business. And there are many families in Bahrain like this. But you know what makes me wonder, then the second generation, they bring their daughters to the business. So how come, you know, the uncle and aunties lose, the aunties lose, and then the nieces and nephews, they become partner in the business. And also, if the father decides, and he's kind enough to give his daughters, he always gives the daughter half the son, which is not supposed to be. The Sharia is after he dies, but if he is alive and his daughters are doing well in business, he should give them equally. And we feel as women, we feel it's not fair, you know, because women and men, if they work in the business, they should get equal rights. And that's why, you know, I personally, I feel with my children, I want to give them equally, whether a boy or a girl. And but my question, this is not my question, my question, it's a bit long. My question is, in your experience, because you deal with many family businesses, what do the family businesses do better and grow bigger than public businesses, or the family business have a better future or not? You know, because we in our family, I'm against going public, but I know some of my brothers and sisters, they would like to go public. I'm against it because I feel family businesses can do much better, and they can look at the long view more than public businesses, where they look year to year at their financials and try to please the stakeholders.
Okay, well, I think that you would expect me to say that family businesses do better long term if they're not public. And I think that if necessary, I could prove that by looking at the value created over many years in different countries and some of the research that's been done. Because a family business that goes public in a short space of time no longer is a family business. And if you look at a company like Mars, the confectionery business, they argued about going, but they would never go public. And the most successful family businesses don't go public. People only go public if there is a an absolutely insatiable desire to get hold of cash. The only reason you go public is access to cash and nothing else. And if the cash is to exit people from the business, then you have to ask yourself why you're doing it. So I have a very simple view, and in fact I put an article in the Times. The Times in London did a supplement last week, and it's a 6-page pull-out supplement, and I had to do the debate arguing for the family capitalism as a model against corporate capitalism. And there's no doubt in my mind that family capitalism is a better long-term model. As regards the point you make about the Sharia, it isn't the first time I've heard somebody say pretty much exactly what you've said. And I'm afraid I think it's a very difficult area. But what I have found is that a lot of people who are involved in an Islamic culture often don't tell the truth about what they're going to do with their shares or what they've done with their shares. And I've met many businessmen who say to the family, oh, everything is going to be done in accordance with the Sharia. And then when you sit down with them after a year or two and they begin to trust you, you find that actually they've signed something that actually overrules that, but they're too frightened to say something publicly to their family that actually they've done this. And I see this all over the place, both with Sharia-based families and India. India as well, exactly the same thing. There's no equivalent of the Sharia law there, but the Indians tell everybody that the girls don't get anything, but ultimately they do. And I think that, again, this is about being honest about what's happening. And I've just finished a case at the moment where the father has got 5 children. He's got 3 daughters and 2 boys. The youngest daughter is the cleverest of all of them, and she's basically running the whole show. And she's 28. And she's much, much, much cleverer than all of her sisters and her older brothers. And the father has said to the 5 children, I'm not going to decide how you're going to divide the assets, you decide. So I got given the children for 2 years for them to work out how they would split up a very, very substantial inheritance between the 5 of them. And he said to them, whatever your decision, I will back. And the reason he did it was that he was fearful that if he carried on a Sharia basis, he would penalize the 28-year-old girl who's doing everything and over-reward the sons. On the other hand, because she's a lot younger than the sons had been promised that it was going to be on a Sharia basis, because that's the basis that they assumed. So you imagine the conflict with that sibling group as to how to do that. Anyway, they've done it, and they just had a big celebration a few weeks ago to do it, and they're not doing it on a Sharia basis, they're doing it on an equal basis, and the only thing they've changed is how they make a decision, because the boys felt that with 2 boys and 3 girls, they would always be outvoted. So in order for them to make a decision, they have to have at least 1 boy in the team that is for a decision. So I've seen it many times, and it's an impossibly difficult subject, but one that you have to deal with honestly. Oh, thank you very much indeed.
Here we are.
Very
What
nice.
a wonderful thing that we give.
That's gorgeous.
Where is it? تعجبني ده. So, sponsor, no? Look, it's not really that well. It's professor. You have to hold it.
Oh,
It's very good.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.